NASCAR says that the 2023 schedule is expected to be released in August, and the LA Coliseum might be joining that schedule as well. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start with paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2022 revenue scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Sonoma. Honestly, I think this paint scheme looks really good. I love the color variations of the black, the yellow, and the red. I think did an amazing job on it. Kyle Six has always done a great job in the paint schemes, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack here this weekend at Sonoma. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2022 Autodesk HaasTooling.com scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Sonoma. This is very similar to the other Autodesk and Haas Tooling schemes. I think it's the first time we've seen this paint scheme. I think it looks really good, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack here this weekend at Sonoma. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Blaney's 2022 Knauf Menard scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Sonoma. I honestly love this paint scheme. Ryan Blaney's had a lot of really good Knauf Menard schemes in the past and has had a lot of good looking Menard schemes. This was no exception. I think did a good job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Sonoma. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osavar's 2022 Worldwide Express scheme that we're going to see in multiple races this season. Now, we're going to talk about Carson Osavar in the later portion of this episode, but I think this paint scheme actually this truck looks absolutely incredible. It's very simple, but there's really not much to say about it other than I think it looks absolutely amazing. And the final paint scheme we are taking a look at is Alex Bowman's 2022 HendrickCars.com Ally scheme that we're going to see when he runs the Xfinity Series for Hendrick Motorsports later this year. There's not really much to say other than that. The only difference on this one is basically that there's an Ally logo on it, especially since Alex Bowman is sponsored by Ally, which I think helps in the reason why he's sponsored by it. I think it actually does look really good. It looks very similar to the Ricky Hendrick schemes he used in the past. I think it looks amazing, and I'm absolutely looking forward to see on the racetrack here when Alex Bowman runs in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Sonoma purses for this weekend. So Bob Pockers always releases the purses for the weekend that are going to be. So, for the Cup Series, it's going to be $7,629,830. This goes with the charter money and the teams that don't get the charter money. And then for the Truck Series, it's not going to be a lot of money. It's going to be $675,134. Not entirely sure how much last place gets, but I think they only get like $6,700, which means that they're basically losing money because they're not making any money because they have to travel all the way out from North Carolina to California because they don't stay in the California area, so they have to travel out there and stuff. That's a lack of money for the Truck Series. I hope the Truck Series gets a little more money in the future. I don't really like that they're not getting a lot of money, but it is what it is, and that's the situation when it comes to the money that they're getting. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about California. Now, it was kind of revealed yesterday that California has their own specialty NASCAR license plates that are now available in the California area. I'm not entirely sure how many states have their own specialties NASCAR's plate. I really don't know. You have to tell me in the comments they do. But I love the fact that NASCAR is giving a little bit of respect to California and giving their own specialty plates, especially since NASCAR is trying to get to the West Coast and race in that area going forward. I love the fact that they're doing their own specialty NASCAR license plates. I love that NASCAR trying to get their branding out there. I think it's smart. People will buy the license plates. They're probably not going to cost a lot, but I think it's really awesome, and I'm glad to see that NASCAR is doing this. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about William Byron. Now, last night, after they rain delayed the race on Wednesday, they had the money in the bank at Berlin Raceway. And William Byron raced with that, I believe, along with Eric Jones and a couple of drivers. And William Byron went on to win the money at the bank at Berlin Raceway. One thing we know about William Byron is it seems like every time he wins a late model race, he wins a NASCAR Cup Series race. So will that translate to the Cup race and he wins that? He's a pretty solid road course racer, and he's had a lot of success at Sonoma Raceway in the past, so maybe he's going to be able to go out there and win. But in all seriousness and all honesty, congratulations to William Byron on going out and winning another late model race. We know William Byron always does great when he gets behind the wheel late models, and honestly, I think it's amazing that he's going back and racing in that series. I think it's awesome, and like I said, congratulations to William Byron on scoring the victory there. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cadillac, as their GTP, the Grand Touring Performance Hypercar, has been officially revealed for the 2023 season. It was revealed yesterday in Le Mans, and their Cadillac has been revealed. I have to say that this Cadillac looks absolutely amazing. and absolutely incredible. The GTP car, which is like GTP Pro and all that stuff, because the GTP is absolutely coming back. IMSA's having a glorious, of course, they're going to the LMDH platform in 2023, and GTB is going to be the top series, very similar to what they used to do back in the 1980s and 90s, and Cadillac is going to be joining that series as well once again. They've had a big tie with the IMSA series. They've got teams like Chip Ganassi Racing that are part of their group, and they've had a lot of success over the years. Honestly, I think it's absolutely incredible and amazing. This car, though, by the way, absolutely looks amazing. It looks sick, and I'm very excited to see this car on the racetrack. I think it's great for the sport, and honestly, very exciting for sure to see that they are bringing that back, and it looks absolutely amazing, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Colby Howard. As Colby Howard is going to be driving the 91 for Bill McAnally Racing in the ARCA West race at Sonoma. Now, there's a couple Truck Series drivers that are competing. Colby Howard currently drives, of course, with McAnally Hillman Racing in the Truck Series, and he's going out there to get a little bit of experience. It would not shock me and surprise me if he goes out and wins the race, because I think his Truck Series experience, I think, is going to play a factor into it. Guys have a lot of experience in the top series, tend to come down to the lower series, and tend to run very, very well. So I think that Colby Howard is going to do very, very well in this race. I think he's going to be very, very competitive. It would not surprise me if he goes out and wins for Bill McAnally Racing this tomorrow afternoon in the ARCA West race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dean Thompson. As Dean Thompson is going to drive the 40 for Nice Motorsports in the ARCA West race at Sonoma. Dean Thompson, of course, drives the 40 for Nice Motorsports in the Campbell Truck Series. It makes a lot of sense why, and I think him getting a little bit of experience makes a lot of sense. I don't think Dean Thompson's a bad driver. I think he's just had a lot of bad luck so far this year in the Truck Series, and he's had some good runs this year, but has also had points where he struggled in the Truck Series this season. I think him getting experience makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad that he's getting an opportunity. He'll probably also be competing for the win because he has all that experience as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jack Wood. As Jack Wood is going to drive the 21 for either GMS or Ackerman Racing this weekend in the ARCA West race at Sonoma. Jack Wood currently drives the 24 for GMS Racing in the Camp World Truck Series, where he has absolutely struggled this year. So I think him going back and running in this race, I think will help him with his experience. I think Jack Wood really needs to run this race, help him out, because like I said, he's really, really struggled over the last year or so. So it makes a ton of sense why he's going back and running this race. I think he absolutely needs to absolutely do this, and I think it's going to help him going forward. I don't think he's going to win the race. There's a lot of good competition, like Landon Lewis is also going to be running this race as well in substitution for Carson Hocevar. But I think it's really good that Jack Wood's getting experience. He really needs it, and hopefully this experience is going to help him out here this weekend at Sonoma in the ARCA West race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Callum Island. Now, for a lot of you who don't know, last week Callum Island did not race at the Detroit Grand Prix in Belle Isle, as he had gotten injured. The doctors had not medically cleared him to race. He had Santino Ferrucci go and place in him. Well, it was officially, I believe, on Wednesday evening that Callum Island has been medically cleared to race this weekend at the Road America, and he'll be back in the 77 for Who Coast Racing this weekend. I'm very, very happy to see he's back this weekend. Callum Island is a very, very talented driver. Has had some decent runs, but has also had a lot of crashes as well. I think him getting back in this truck to get some experience makes a ton of sense. I think he'll be a driver that I think could be very competitive. I think the Juncos Racing team is one of the most underrated teams and underfunded teams, and yet they've shown a lot of promise and a lot of speed with the Juncos Hollinger group. So I'm very excited to see Callum Island's back. I'm glad that he's getting a lot better, and I'm happy to see that Callum Island is going to be back behind the wheel this weekend. Very exciting, and glad to see he's back behind the wheel with Road America this weekend with the Juncos Hollinger team. I think he's going to be pretty competitive this weekend, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Apple and F1. Now, something I did not really talk about this past week was when it comes to Apple and Formula One. It was available, I believe, on Monday evening or Tuesday evening that Apple has acquired the rights to an untitled F1 film that is going to star Brad Pitt. Unclear how much money is going to be going in. I think it's like $40 million. This movie is going to be set to be directed by Joseph Kosinski. For those of you who don't know, Joseph Kosinski is a guy who directed Top Gun Maverick, and with Lewis Hamilton producing the film as well. So you're going to have F1 legend, one of the greatest, and probably the greatest Formula 1 driver ever, Lewis Hamilton, producing the film. For a lot of you who don't know, Joseph Kosinski, like I mentioned here, was a guy who helped basically direct Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick, absolutely incredible film. Now, the plot of the film I'm a little nervous about because the plot of the film sounds very, very similar to Driven. And I'm a little nervous that that is going to be basically cause F1 to have a lot of issues. Now, currently F1 right now is really growing in the area. And I think NASCAR really has a big issue when it comes to this. And this is where Formula 1, I think, is beating NASCAR in many, many ways. Formula 1 in the United States right now is absolutely growing. And the fact that they're making a Formula 1 film on Apple, that gets me nervous for NASCAR's future a little bit because F1's in a good position. Now, I want to see all motorsports succeed. Do not get me wrong. And I think them doing this is absolutely incredible and amazing. But I'm a little nervous and NASCAR is going to have some problems going forward if they don't start getting and doing stuff like this. They've stayed in kind of their area. They need to get out there and do things. But I love the fact that Formula 1's doing this. I want the sport to succeed, and I'm glad to see it doing this. I think this is great, and honestly, I think overall it's great for the sport of Formula 1, and congratulations to them on this. I really hope the movie's good. I'm a little nervous about it, but I really do hope and pray that the movie ends up doing really good for Formula 1, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chris Bushland. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race a couple weeks ago in Charlotte, you saw the massive accident and flip that happened off of turn number 4. And a lot of people, including the owner of that car, Brad Keselowski, complained about how long it took to get out of the car. Well, at the event, we got a lot of comments from Steve Phelps, who's the president of NASCAR, at that event. He addressed and talked about this. He says, we understand it is uncomfortable for a driver to be upside down, but it's the safest way for us to get the driver out, and he feels that NASCAR took the best precautions to get the driver out. He basically understands it and stuff, but he understands at the same time it takes time to get him out. I think it's honestly a fair assessment that Steve Phelps said. I think it took them about 5 or 6 minutes to get Chris Bushland out. And look, it did take a long time, but I also think that there are some other contributing factors that happen. He also says that if he was injured and Chris Bushland was injured, we would have got him out very, very quickly and would have been able to find a way to get him out. Because he wasn't injured, they wanted to take their time. And I do think that because this is an next-gen car, we haven't seen a flip like this before where a car was basically upside down. I don't think they entirely knew how to get the process done because again, this car is much different than other cars. NASCAR would have had a really much quicker process getting him flipped back over if they had basically known about this a little bit faster if he was okay or not. But because of the fact that they didn't really know how this car worked when it comes to flipping it back over, they wanted to take their precautious time. So I think NASCAR did the best they could. Look, I understand NASCAR fans want these drivers to be safe and want them to get out as quick as possible. And I think generally they handled it the best they could. I know it took a long time, and honestly, I think a lot of the industry people felt it'd be uncomfortable. But I think NASCAR feels like they did honestly a solid job, and I think they did the best they could in the situation they had. I do think that they could find a way to speed up the process, and I do think over time they will probably go faster because I think it's being a new car, I think they didn't know exactly what to do. But I believe that the longer they get this and more experience and more we see more flips, I think NASCAR will be much quicker getting these drivers out of their cars. So in all honesty, in all seriousness, I think NASCAR generally did the best they can. Yes, I think fans want drivers to get out much quicker, but in all seriousness, in all honesty, NASCAR generally did the best they could. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin. Now, we've got another comment from Steve Phelps when it comes to the situation with Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin when it comes to penalties. And Steve Phelps says as long as the car is not being used as a weapon, they don't feel like they need to assess penalties. Now, they also mentioned that basically Denny Hamlin was right to be upset, and Denny Hamlin was very, very frustrated. And they said that Denny Hamlin did not use the car as a weapon. And NASCAR says that unless it's being used, they don't want to send out penalties. I absolutely agree with NASCAR on this point. I don't believe that NASCAR needs to be getting involved with every situation going on. And we'll talk about this later when we get to the Haley Deegan story later in this episode. But I think NASCAR, and they have said they're probably going to meet with Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin. Now, for a lot of you who don't know the backstory, basically a gateway this past weekend at Worldwide Technology Raceway, the inaugural race at Worldwide Technology Raceway, we saw Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin basically get involved in controversy where Ross Chastain was really, really frustrated and upset with Denny Hamlin and got into the back of it. Denny Hamlin then made Ross Chastain's life a living hell pretty much by basically running him down to the bottom of the track, blocking him, almost actually costing him an opportunity to finish the race, almost not meeting the minimum speed, and nearly taking Ross Chastain out of contention in the race. Ross still ended up finishing 7th, and Denny Hamlin said the payback might be coming between him and Ross Chastain took responsibility, and he says he owes half the field an apology, making him almost a modern-day Ernie Irvan, because you remember back in the early 1990s, which I wasn't alive at the time, back in the early 1990s, Ernie Irvan had to apologize to the field because of this. I think that Ross Chastain, I think NASCAR is in the right for not basically penalizing Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain here. I don't think penalties need to be assessed. I think they need to watch closely. If things do get overboard, if Hamlin intentionally wrecks him somewhere, I think they may have to step in and address it. But I don't think NASCAR needs to make a judgment call on everything. And in my honest opinion, I think NASCAR not penalizing both of the drivers, I think is the right decision unless it gets overboard and it does become a major issue going forward, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a rule that kind of was revealed here. Now, on Wednesday, Bob Pockers reports that NASCAR says a safety violation may be imposed for any action or omission by a competitor or vehicle that creates an unsafe environment or poses a threat to the safety of the competitors as determined by NASCAR, which applies if driver drives through box during another team's stop. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, one of the big reasons we're talking about is because of what happened a couple weeks ago in the Coco 600. If you watch the Coco 600, which many of you that probably watch my channel probably did watch, in fact, probably all of you watch my channel probably watched Coco 600 during the Memorial Day weekend. You probably heard about the controversy with Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano. Joey Logano basically felt that his crew got hurt. One of Joey Logano's crew members actually was clipped by Denny Hamlin, and Denny Hamlin initially had said that he did not basically run into Joey Logano's pit crew. But Denny Hamlin did actually ask Paul Wolfe later, and basically they reviewed the situation and the incident on, I believe, Friday or Saturday, and basically went on Twitter and apologized for the incident and said that I went into the box. I apologize. It was my entire fault. I went into the box way too deep, and I did clip Joey's pit crew, and I absolutely apologize for what I did. Now, in my honest opinion, I don't think Denny Hamlin intentionally tried to get out to Joey Logano. I know those two really don't have a great history racing against each other, but I do not personally believe that Denny Hamlin intentionally ran into Joey Logano's pit crew. I think it just was an honest, insincere mistake. I don't personally think he did it intentionally. I think it's just an honest mistake by Denny Hamlin. I think Denny Hamlin was trying to get advantage and trying to get in his pit stop and get out as quick as possible. That's the goal of the driver. They're trying to get as quick of pit stops as they can. But I think what Denny Hamlin was trying to do was get out pit road as fast as possible, get out there quick, get in, get out, and try to win the race, which, by the way, he did go on to win the Coco 600. Yes, he kind of won it because a lot of wrecks happened near the end. Caution came out late with Chase Briscoe spinning, battling Larson for the victory. But Denny Hamlin was trying to win the race, and I cannot entirely blame him. And Joey Logano, to be fair to him, he kind of also cost another driver shot at winning Daniel Suarez, because he kind of was, and Logano was kind of putting him in the bad position because Logano was really near Daniel Suarez. And let's be honest, Joey Logano was having better pit stops than Daniel Suarez. I think NASCAR, though, when it comes to judgment calls, I'm a little nervous about this going forward, and maybe we'll see something turn around for this. We'll maybe see some penalties going forward. We've had other issues. We saw past week also at the race where we saw some contact between drivers on pit road. I think Zane Smith and Michael McDowell, who Michael McDowell had a really incredible run at this past weekend, by the way. We saw those issues flare up. But I do believe that NASCAR does not need to penalize drivers if things don't get serious to the point, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hailie Deegan. Now, we do have a couple stories around Hailie Deegan to talk to, but the first we're going to talk about is her criticism toward the Truck Series and the structure and what needs to be enforced. So Hailie Deegan was being interviewed in the Ford Media Publicity this past Wednesday, and she says the Truck Series needs more discipline and structure. She kind of talked about this and says that basically the Truck Series, especially in the middle of the pack where she's running, the Truck Series absolutely gets nuts and absolutely crazy. And she feels like NASCAR needs to start enforcing judgment calls and needs to start enforcing penalties to drivers that are driving way over in their head and way aggressive. Now, I do agree with Hailie Deegan that the Truck Series has definitely gotten a little bit overboard. This really started about 3 or 4 years ago is when the Truck Series started kind of losing their mind a little bit, and a lot of these younger drivers coming through really want to have something to prove. A lot of these drivers also, when it comes to them, have a lot of money backing them, so that probably is the reason why these drivers get a little bit over-aggressive and race extremely hard. But one thing I will not agree with her on is the fact that I do not believe that NASCAR needs to be making judgment calls and penalizing drivers. Because what I'm worried about is it could become a massive gray area. What is there to say, basically, that NASCAR could penalize a driver? I think that they would have actually penalized Alex Bowman for his move at Dakota. They would have penalized Alex Bowman for that move. But NASCAR has a judgment call. Maybe they will forget drivers and stuff. But she's also been raced really, really hard. There's been a lot of videos coming up of her. She got pushed over by Todd Bodine. We've seen the veterans get a little bit over crazy. And we've seen the younger drivers also race each other very, very hard as well, especially near the middle of the pack. And let's not forget about Hailie Deegan for a second. The Hailie Deegan also herself has been involved in controversy as well, where she's been causing a lot of damage as well. She basically got involved in a couple situations in the ARCA West races where she took out Derek Kraus. She's moved people and has raced drivers very, very aggressively, and she's raced drivers really, really hard for the win. And NASCAR at the point, you can basically I'm worried that NASCAR will have an issue making judgment calls and will cause a little bit more issues going forward. So what needs to happen here when it comes to the truck series? I think it does need to calm down. So how do you kind of enforce this? Well, I personally think that if there's a driver in a truck series who wants to race super aggressive, make them work on the cars. Make the teams get involved. And basically give the drivers a bill. I know it's kind of crazy, but I think if the drivers are going to go out there and race aggressive, a lot of drivers have a lot of money backing them. Why not make the drivers go ahead and work on the cars? I actually don't see a problem with it. I personally think that if the drivers want to race hard and race aggressively like she's saying they are, they need to basically pay for the equipment. Make them pay for the equipment. Make them work on it. And we've seen younger drivers working on their stuff. We've seen John Ermichek working on the cars. We've seen Noah Gragson, who's wrecked his stuff in the past, work on the cars. Seen Todd Gillen in the past work on their cars. And I think a lot of these drivers do work on them, but I think if the drivers are going to race these cars really, really hard, I think there needs to be a structure, but I think the teams need to basically decide, hey, let's go ahead and basically go right ahead and force the drivers on our team to fix these cars and get involved in that. I think making them work on the car would make a ton of sense, in my honest opinion, of NASCAR. I think this would be a great decision, and I do agree with her. Digression needs to stop, but I don't think NASCAR needs to get involved because they don't need judgment calls. I do believe, though, that the teams, they themselves, need to get involved and decide what they need to do in regards to that. And now we're going ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Carson Hocevar. Now, we have not talked much about the Carson Hocevar situation this past week. We finally got a major update in regards to Carson Hocevar. And a lot of people think Carson Hocevar was not going to be racing the rest of the year. Well, that is not actually the case. It was reported on Wednesday evening, around 6 or 7 o'clock, around the time the NASCAR Weekly podcast started, that Carson Hocevar is actually going to start the race at Sonoma this weekend, and they're actually going to have Daniel Suarez on standby, ready to go, just in case. Now, Carson Hocevar is going to meet with NASCAR, I believe, later today at some point to evaluate the situation and to see if he's good to go. Now, the reason Carson Hocevar is starting the race, and basically probably won't finish it, but the reason he wants to start the race, I believe, is because, one, he says he feels better every day, and his statement said he's starting to feel better every day, but he wants to have a driver on standby just in case. You also remember that we have a couple more weeks in a row before the Truck Series is off. We got a race this weekend in Sonoma, next weekend in Knoxville, and then we have a race in Nashville. We have a couple weeks before the Truck Series is off. So I think Carson wants to have it. Also, why do they bring Daniel Suarez in? One, Trackhouse Racing also has Worldwide Express on their cars. Nice Motorsports has a big partnership with Worldwide Express as well. So that's why they brought Daniel Suarez in. Also, a lot of road course experience and a lot of Cup Series experience to be brought in as well. Now, according to also reports, and this is reported by multiple people as well, he apparently has surgery on his ankle from the crash. Because a lot of you forget, he was involved in a very scary accident in the Gateway race. On the last lap of the race, he got turned by Derek Cross. He found out it was Derek Cross who got into him on the last lap. And Tyler Hill clipped him on the door, hit him very, very hard. Now, he gave the thumbs up, but they had to get the stretcher. And he basically, I'm glad Carson Hocevar is at least starting the race. I want him to have a speedy recovery so he can be better. I'm surprised he's even starting the race after surgery. I'm kind of shocked he is. I don't know. I kind of know why Daniel Suarez kind of provided the information. I think he was the one that provided the information. Maybe it was just an innocent mistake. I don't think it did it on purpose. But I personally, when it comes to Carson Hocevar, I'm surprised he's even racing at a road course. But here's what I expect. I think Carson's going to start the race. I think he's going to run 1 or 2 laps, and I think he's going to hand it over to Daniel Suarez. Or he may go through the first stage and try to get points. But remember, Carson has to start the race because, again, also Carson Hocevar is really tight right now on the playoff battle. He's got a decent cushion right now, but if he misses a race, he probably could lose all those points. So that's why I think Carson Hocevar is starting the race. And I think Nice wants him to start the race, but they also, I think, want a speedy recovery for him. And he also, remember, like I mentioned, we got a couple races coming up here very, very soon where the Truck Series is going to race. I just honestly believe when it comes to this, I'm glad Carson is racing, and Carson's had a really good sense of humor. If you go check his profile, he had a link to a Family Guy episode. It's like, I don't want to get into it, but I'm fine. I absolutely love Carson so far, and the Carson's had such a rough year this year, and he almost won Charlotte earlier this year, had a pretty good truck at Gateway, was leading laps there. It's a shame what happened on the last lap, and again, I'm wishing for a really good and speedy recovery for Carson Hocevar. I think he'll be able to, I don't think he's going to finish the race, to be honest. I don't think he's going to finish. And I think the question is going forward, how many races will he start and rate and finish with someone else like a Tyler Carpenter at Knoxville, perhaps? He's supposed to run for that team at Knoxville. So overall, we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to this situation. But it's good to see Daniel Suarez getting involved and drive for the Team East Motorsports. It is a substitute for him in the future. And glad to see a Carson Hocevar at least going to start the race at Sonoma. Wishing for a speedy recovery for Carson Hocevar. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hailie Deegan. Now, we already talked about Hailie Deegan earlier in this episode, but Hailie Deegan also continued about her talks about the Xfinity Series, because she talked about last year that she wants to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, we got a little bit of update in regards to that, and she told the people in the media that she is still working on her plans to run the Xfinity Series this year, but she says she has nothing set as far right now as potential starts in the Xfinity Series in 2022. She does say that she is looking to try to get some starts in the Xfinity Series, but has nothing confirmed at this point. Now I want to talk about Hailie Deegan so far in 2022, because I'm going to be honest about Hailie Deegan. I think Hailie Deegan is a very, very talented girl. She's a very talented driver. The big problem with Hailie Deegan, though, is that Hailie Deegan in the Truck Series this year has absolutely struggled. Her best finish was this past week in a Gateway. It's 15th. She's had a lot of bad luck this year. There's no doubt about that. She's been involved in a lot of wrecks that really haven't been part of her doing. But she's also been running a lot of these races outside the top 15 and top 20, and has not been running these races really, really well. Yes, it's kind of hard to pass in the Truck Series. You're going full throttle, but she should be performing a lot better. Now, I think sometimes, though, and I will give her the benefit of the doubt, she probably would actually perform a lot better in the NASCAR, some better in the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series. I think she would do better because I think some drivers, their talent translates better in different cars. Look at Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton really struggled in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, and a lot of people were questioning if Harrison was ready to move up to Xfinity. That same year, the next year, when he got questioned, he went on to win 4 races and nearly made the Final 4 that year, but unfortunately got beat near the end as he got eliminated in the first round after crashing out. Had he not those issues at Talladega in the playoffs in 2020, he'd probably be right now in potentially going out there and being in the Final 4 that year as he went on to win 4 races. He didn't win again in 2021, but he did have a decent year, and now he's a Cup Series driver. Some drivers translate better in cars than the Truck Series. I think Jimmy Johnson are a perfect example. Struggling in Xfinity, goes to Cup and does extremely well. I think it's a style of driving that she has, and I don't think it's a style of driving she has is great. I think some drivers are better at different styles than others, and I think maybe in the future she gets some starts, but I think Ford wants to keep her in her develop, and at some point it's going to be getting a little too late. I think she will at some point end up in the Xfinity Series, whether we like it or not. I don't know if it'll be 2023 or 2024, but I would right now say that more than likely she's probably going to be in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, Truck Series, for at least another season. I think 2024 is the earliest she'll be up in Xfinity full time. I would think by 2023 she will make some Xfinity Series starts. There was a lot of talk that Tony was going to form a second Xfinity Series car. That's why there was talk about this, but I just think right now Tony Stewart and that team, they got to focus on getting Riley Herbst in the playoffs right now. I don't see them opening up a second car. I know there's been rumors that Tony wants to run the Indy road course race for the Xfinity Series. There's still some talks around that right now. There's a big possibility that that's going to happen. But in all honesty, in all seriousness, I think her staying in Xfinity for another year makes a lot of sense. I just think right now, again, I think a few Xfinity starts here would really help her. I think they get her some experience and would help her, but honestly, I think Ford just wants to keep developing her. But I think Ford also has a big problem where they don't have a lot of places for her to go right now, but there are some rides opening up in the future. You've got Kevin Harvick, who's probably going to retire after 2023, and you also have got other drivers in the near future potentially are going to retire. So we'll have to wait and see what happens if she does get some starts in Xfinity, but I'm really betting right now that she's probably not going to have starts in the Xfinity Series, to be honest with you, in 2022. And probably have to wait till 2023 till we see her, because she's going to be 22 by next year. She's going to be getting a little bit older, and at some point she's going to have to move up. But when is that going to happen? That's going to be the big question. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sammy Smith. As it was revealed yesterday morning that Sammy Smith is going to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut later this year, and he'll be driving in the 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for 8 races. His first race is going to be Road America on the July 4th weekend, then a race at Pocono, Michigan, Watkins Glen, Kansas, Bristol, Martinsville, and Phoenix. For those who do not know who Sammy Smith is the defending ARCA East champion and has gone on to win a lot of races so far there. He's won 6 career races in the ARCA East Series. Last year went on to win 3 of the 8 races, and so far this year, he has won 3 out of the 4 ARCA East races this year. Sammy Smith, no doubt, is a very, very talented driver. He actually led the most laps in the ARCA race at Phoenix, but ended up finishing 3rd. Well, of course, that race, I believe, was won by Taylor Gray, and he's competing there, and it will be at some point competing full-time in the ARCA Series. In fact, he's supposed to start racing ARCA full-time here in the near future. He drives for Kyle Busch Motorsports in ARCA East and ARCA in the main ARCA Series as well. Sammy Smith is currently one of the highest Toyota prospects behind, I think, Ty Gibbs. I think he's the second guy in command. And I think Sammy Smith is a very, very talented driver who just turned 18 about a week ago. My expectations for Sammy Smith, I think he's going to have a shot at winning races. This car, when you have a good driver, is capable of going out there winning. Look at Trevor Bayne. No one thought Trevor Bayne would be competing for victories. He's been competitive pretty much every single time he's gotten behind the wheel of that 18 car and has been fast every time he's won stages and has been a contender, but he's had a lot of penalties on pit road that have taken him out of contention. We've seen John Hunter be really competitive in that car. Ryan Truex has had some speed in that car. I think Sammy Smith will fit right in, and again, it would not shock me if he gets a win or two this year, but I think getting in there and having some experience will be great. I think top 5s would be minimum where he finishes, because again, I think Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones have to be a little nervous right now because I think both those guys are going to have to deal with Sammy Smith in the long-term future. And a lot of people are really high on Sammy Smith, including myself, when it comes to his talent and capabilities. This kid is going to be extremely successful in NASCAR, and I'm really shocked that he's making Xfinity Series starts. And I think the question is he going to jump just straight away from the ARCA Series and jump full-time in Xfinity next year? So I think that's what they're probably looking at. Are they looking to maybe get him some NASCAR Xfinity Series starts to get him prepared for 2023? Because I know a lot of people think about the 19 car Martin Truex Jr. There's a lot of talk maybe Truex may be looking to retire after this year, and I think we're gonna be knowing that decision here in the next week or two. We're going to find that out in the near future. But in all seriousness and all honesty, I'm really happy to see Sammy Smith is getting some NASCAR Xfinity Series starts. I think he wins a race. I really think he does. I don't see him winning more than 1 or 2, but I think he's going to win at least a race or 2. But I think he'll get a lot of top 5s and a lot of top 10s in those cars. That car is capable of winning every single week. That All-Star car, he's got Jason Ratcliffe as a crew chief, but Jason Ratcliffe is a championship caliber crew chief who's won championships in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think the team is going to be extremely successful. And again, I'm very pumped up and very excited to see that Sammy Smith is getting behind the wheel in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think he's going to do extremely well. I think he's a very, very talented kid, and I think he'll be very successful long-term as he'll be looking to, at some point, jump full-time in the series. I think, again, he's going to be full-time next year at Xfinity. If Brandon Jones makes a jump up the Cup, I think there's a chance he could jump up the Cup. We also got John Hurt could be taking that 19. But in all honesty, in all seriousness, I am very pumped up and very excited to see that they are going to go ahead and have Sammy Smith running the Xfinity Series on a part-time basis. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're going to first talk about the Los Angeles Coliseum. Now, we're going to be talking about the 2023 schedule in just a little bit, but one race that is expected to be returning to 2023 is the LA Coliseum. Steve Phelps suggests, and is reported by Adam Stern, that Steve Phelps has suggested at a recent sports summit, I believe in San Francisco, that NASCAR is likely to hold the Clash at the LA Coliseum again next year. We haven't announced that we are going to go back to the LA Coliseum. I'd be surprised if we didn't. It sure seems like a good idea to me. Now, before the race happened in 2022, this year, a lot of people were very, very skeptical of the event. But this event, the LA Bushland Clash at the LA Coliseum, was an absolute hit for so many reasons. The heat races were really, really good. You had a lot of drama in the heat races. You had a lot of drivers angry and pissed off with each other. And a lot of really solid and great racing as well. And the next-gen car, this was definitely the best short-track race we have seen so far with the next-gen car, considering that the next-gen car has kind of struggled at other short tracks here due to being a flat track issue where it's really, really difficult to pass. It really was a very, very successful event, and he had a very successful halftime show, and the ratings were incredible. I think almost 5 million people tuned into the race for a Busch Clash race, the most watched the Busch Clash in nearly 6 or 7 years, and it was an extremely successful event, and the event nearly sold out. It almost had a full crowd. You didn't just have NASCAR fans there, but you had a lot of Los Angeles crowd. You had Face Planet was getting involved in the event. You had that incredible halftime show with Ice Cube. You had Pitbull performing there. You had DJ Ski, who did that really cool where basically every time a caution came out, he was performing music during it. The event was so electric, and it was talked about as such this major event, and they did a lot of promotion for this event as well. And Fox put more promotion, honestly, into the LA Coliseum race than the Daytona 500, which is why I think the 500 had a little bit of lack of ratings. But I think absolutely NASCAR, they know the stadium idea and stadium concept has worked very, very well, and they absolutely need to return to the Los Angeles Coliseum. It was a very successful event, and they need to return there next year. Now, the big question is, will the same crowd show up in 2023 as it did in 2022? I think very possibly. LA market is a massive market. A lot of people were very intrigued to say, hey, NASCAR's in town. And it was such a different event than any other NASCAR event. You're not going to see a NASCAR event or NASCAR race that was like that. The intros and walking up the stairs, walking down to their cars was an amazing. And I want to see this event back next year, and I'm glad that they're looking to bring it back. You had the LA market, you had a lot of younger fans, and again, it was best, I think, so far outside of the Daytona 500, I think it's the highest rated 18 to 49 demographic race, maybe outside of Bristol Dirt race as well. But I think this NASCAR, I will say this, NASCAR and Ben Kennedy have done an amazing job. And you got to thank Ben Kennedy for this when it comes to this. Ben Kennedy wanted this event to succeed, and like I said, so many people were skeptical of this event, but I really want it to be back next year, and I think it's going to be back next year. So it's amazing for the sport as a Busch Clash. My question is, will it be the week before or 2 weeks before? I would still think it probably would be 2 weeks before so teams can travel back. Would they also increase the purse? I would think they would. And I hope we see more than just the charter teams next year. I want to see 40 or 43 cars show up to the event, including the unchartered teams. I hope NASCAR at some points distributes the money a little bit more to the unchartered teams, increases the purse for the unchartered teams so we can see more unchartered teams show up. But I think it was such a massive and incredible event that they put on, and I'm very happy to see that they're expecting to bring this event back. I think it was amazing, and I'm glad to see they're likely to bring the LA Coliseum race back. Again, it was just watching the energy around the event. People were excited. The halftime show was great. You don't see a halftime show bring up that much energy. I know it's a lot of country music acts, and I love country music, do not get me wrong. But I think you have a lot of country acts, people are not going to be attuned as much as the younger demographic. And Ice Cube being there brought a lot of energy. So I'm really excited. Look likely it's going to come back next year, and I love it. They're looking to bring it back. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're also talking about the 2023 NASCAR schedule. Now, Steve Phelps was being interviewed by Pop Pockrass, and Steve Phelps says that the plan is to remain bold with the schedule and hopes that the 2023 schedule will be released sometime in August. So the timetable for them to release is August. They said that they're planning to release the schedule a little bit earlier this year and planning to release in August. Now, Ben Kennedy did say earlier this year, I think about a month or two ago, that they say that the schedule is not being planned to be as bold, but Steve Phelps wants to remain bold with the schedule. And NASCAR's tried a lot of both things over the last couple of years when it comes to scheduling. Like I said, with the Busch Clash at the LA Coliseum, a lot of people were nervous about that. It was a massive event. NASCAR's gone out to the Portland area for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and while the racing was kind of nuts and crazy, you had a ton of fans that showed out. NASCAR went to Worldwide Technology Race this past weekend at Gateway, and had one of the most massive crowds we've seen so far this year, one of the top 5 most attended events of the 2022 calendar. Like 8,000 people there in the stands. And NASCAR is looking to go to new markets as well. Now, I'm going to be making a schedule predictions video some point in 2023, and you'll hear some things. One thing was asked, was a street course race, is that going to happen? And Steve Phelps says, we'd like to have one. We're not sure, though. We do know right now they're in talks currently right now about having the street course in Chicago coming back in 2023. They're talking about trying to get that done, but there's also been issues getting that done for. I do think there's going to be races in Chicago area in 2023. There's a lot of rumors about Chicagoland. Chicagoland might be coming back as well. We also know some other changes that for sure are coming for 2023. Most likely, like I said, the LA Coliseum's coming back. We know that Gateway's coming back because I think they got a 2-year deal. Phoenix has a season finale again next year. Texas, unfortunately, has the All-Star race again next year. Daytona 500, we already know that set date for that. I think it's going to be February 19th or February 20th. A lot of other events are getting set up for 2023 currently at the moment. I think Dover is going to be back for 2023 as well. I think that's been confirmed. And Bristol Dirt is also once again confirmed to be back around Easter as well. And there are also a lot of other events that are starting to be confirmed for 2023. My question is, what other changes do I think are going to be coming to the schedule? Well, one thing I think that could end up happening for 2023, I think NASCAR could go up to Portland. I really think they will, and I'll tell you why. NASCAR wants to go to new markets, right? And NASCAR wants to get up into that Northwest market. Portland had a great crowd for a NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Now, of course, you have to think about this for a minute. Where could this fit on? Well, honestly, I think what you do is take away one of the Atlanta dates, the second Atlanta date, and bring it to Portland. I think I think most NASCAR Cup Series tracks should only have one date if you want to start getting bold with the schedule. I think that NASCAR wants to get more races, tracks, start taking dates from tracks. Las Vegas, take one of their dates away. Atlanta, take one of their dates away. Only a few tracks right now, in my honest opinion, should have 2 dates. Martinsville, Talladega, and honestly Daytona should be the only ones that have 2 dates. Darlington, I love the track, don't get me wrong. They kind of deserve 2 dates, but I think if NASCAR wanted to be bold, they take one of their dates away from Darlington, but it's been such a successful for Mother's Day, they're probably going to keep it. But I think NASCAR should be looking to go to different areas, and I think they're looking to go to different countries as well. NASCAR's talking about going to, like, stadiums in different countries, and they're talking about it right now. And I don't know how many changes we're going to see this year. I really don't. But I really want to see, and honestly, if they were smart enough, put Gateway in the playoffs and take away a day from Texas. Again, unfortunately, Texas is going to have 2 days next year, which is unfortunate, but let's get rid of Texas. If we can get rid of Texas, that would be great. I think fans generally will be really, really happy about that. But in all seriousness, in all honesty, transferring back to this story, I really am intrigued to see what the schedule is going to look like next year. And NASCAR last couple years, especially with their scheduling, has been really, really bold. I do think at some point NASCAR is not going to be as bold when it comes to this. We'll have to wait and see. One racetrack that, though, is futures in question is Road America. We talked about this earlier this week. I think earlier this week or last week. We talked about the future of Road America. I know that they're repaving the facility right now, but NASCAR's contract right now with that track only goes through 2022 right now, and it's unclear right now if they're going to continue racing at Road America or not. That's one thing we're going to kind of have to wait and see what happens. But I really am excited to see what kind of changes are bringing to the 2023 schedule, and I think that there's a lot of excitement around it. NASCAR's in a great position. They need to continue being bold with strategies, and maybe they build a new track in a different state, and maybe go to New Orleans perhaps. Who knows? But I'm really intrigued to see what they're going to do, if they bring a short course race or not. That's one thing to watch going forward. So, anyway, that is your today's Law NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on my page as well. Let's get you forward with that and comment with your thoughts on today's video. Do you think a NASCAR for sure will return to the Los Angeles Coliseum or not? Let me know in the comments below. And do you think for sure NASCAR release a schedule in August or not? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, more than likely, we're going to have the NASCAR Truck Series race review from Sonoma, the DoorDash 250. Sunday, we're going to have the NASCAR Cup Series race review from Sonoma. And then, of course, we will have that massive project coming. I'm not expecting a news video that will be coming out on Monday because I've got that big project coming on Tuesday. The Top 100 Greatest NASCAR Drivers 2022 edition is coming out this Tuesday, and I think you're all going to enjoy it. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.